They won't say it out loud, but you can feel it. The air changes when you enter a room. Smiles tighten, laughter fades, conversations stumble into awkward silence. And it's not because you're rude, arrogant, or even doing anything wrong. It's because there's something about you, something unspoken, a quiet intensity they can't explain but can't ignore. You listen not to respond, but to understand. You speak with precision, and when your eyes meet theirs, they often look away. You've probably been told you're too serious, too intense, too much. But what if you're not too much? What if you're just different in a way the world rarely sees, but instantly reacts to? Carl Jung believed that those who confront their shadow carry a different kind of energy, not soft or performative, but magnetic, unsettling, and deeply real. This isn't about some mystical aura. This is psychological presence, the kind that unconsciously challenges the people around you. You don't say much, but your energy speaks. And for those still hiding behind their masks, that kind of honesty feels threatening. Because the truth is, people aren't afraid of you. They're afraid of what you reveal about themselves. Their fears, their insecurities, their illusion of control. And so they withdraw, they avoid, they gossip. Not because you're broken, but because your presence is rare. And in a world addicted to comfort, rare is terrifying. In this video, we'll explore 13 signs that your aura might be quietly overwhelming to others, not because there's something wrong with you, but because you've stepped into a version of yourself they're not ready to meet. Let's begin. They feel your energy before you speak. The aura of a man who's met himself. There are men who walk into a room and say nothing, yet everything changes. Heads turn, attention sharpens. People make space without knowing why. It's not the clothes, it's not the looks, it's not even confidence in the traditional sense. It's something deeper, something ancient. Its presence, the invisible weight of a man who knows who he is. Carl Jung called it the energy of individuation, the lived aura of a man who has integrated his shadow and stands in quiet truth. And this is where most men misunderstand themselves. They chase charisma through technique, through words, tactics, or charm. But all of that collapses in the presence of real energetic alignment, because people don't respond to what you say. They respond to what your soul emits. Your unspoken energy is the loudest language you speak. But where does this aura come from? Not from pretending, not from being liked, not from being right. It comes from authenticity, from radical self-honesty, from having walked through your own chaos and chosen clarity over comfort. The aura is not manufactured. It's earned in silence, in failure, in solitude. It's born when a man no longer runs from himself. Jung's theory of the shadow is central here. The parts of you that you reject, your anger, your pain, your past mistakes, don't disappear, they go underground. And when ignored, they leak into your energy. You can be kind, but your resentment will still be felt. You can smile, but your neediness will still radiate. You can say, "I'm fine," but your emotional instability will tremble underneath. The unconscious becomes visible not in your words, but in your vibration. And this is why aura matters, because it is not about how you look. It is about how deeply you've met yourself. It is about how whole you are when no one is watching. It is about how little you need to prove. In relationships, this aura is everything. A woman may hear your compliments, but she feels your insecurity. She may see your effort, but sense your lack of self. Energy never lies. And the tragic mistake many men make is thinking women leave because of what they lack materially. Often, they leave because the man's energy is hollow, disconnected, fragmented, in a society obsessed with appearance. This truth feels radical. Your energy is your reality. When you have not integrated your pain, you project it. When you have not healed your shame, you demand compensation. But when you've done the inner work, you don't need to perform, you emanate. The Stoics understood this long before the modern age. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts," which means your essence, what people feel from you, comes from your inner dialogue, your values, your presence of mind, not the image you craft, not the story you sell. And so, we must ask, what do people feel when they stand next to you? Not what do they think of you, not what do they admire, but what do they feel? Do they feel safety, integrity, quiet strength, or do they feel anxiety, performance, grasping? A man with aura does not beg. He doesn't chase. He doesn't fill silence with noise. He occupies space by being aligned. His silence is not weakness, it is full of principle, of reflection, of grounded power. He is not looking for approval. He is radiating self-trust, and that is magnetic. But you can't fake this. You cannot copy it. You must become it. And to become it, you must do the work that has no witnesses. You must confront the parts of you that still operate from fear. You must bring your shadow into light, not to shame it, but to integrate it, to say, yes, I've been weak, I've begged, I've chased, but that is not the man I choose to be anymore. You practice truth in private. You align your habits with your values. You break the addiction to external validation. You walk away from things that don't serve your soul, even if they look good on the outside. You let solitude strengthen you. You let silence rebuild you, and slowly, without trying, your energy changes. You start to walk differently. Speak less, observe more, laugh deeper, love slower. You become a man whose presence is a mirror, one that reflects truth, not performance. And the world responds because people are starving for realness, for centeredness, for calm masculinity that does not dominate but anchors, for men who no longer chase love but embody it. So if you've ever wondered why you feel invisible, ask yourself, have I abandoned myself? Because the moment you return to your truth, your energy will speak for you, and no one will be able to look away. She feels it before you speak. The quiet power of a man who doesn't need to explain himself. He walks into the room and doesn't say much. He's not loud. He's not dressed to impress. He's not trying to prove a point. Yet she notices him, not because he demands her attention, but because something about him doesn't ask for it. That, ironically, is what makes her drawn. His presence carries no explanation, no overcompensation, just quiet certainty. She feels it before he speaks. This is a man who is not performing. In a world full of noise, explanation has become currency. People try to justify their worth, validate their emotions, narrate their stories in real time. But a man who has done the inner work does not feel the need to explain. He's not hiding. He's not begging to be understood. His clarity is internal, and therefore, his energy becomes undeniable. Carl Jung would say that this man has integrated his shadow. He no longer projects his insecurities onto others. He's faced the loneliness, the guilt, the shame, and emerged not perfect, but whole. His self-worth no longer depends on who responds to him or how quickly. He's not searching for approval because he's no longer at war with himself. When a man reaches this point, women sense it instantly. It's not charm, it's gravity. His gaze is calm, his silence is steady. He doesn't offer his attention cheaply, but not out of arrogance, out of intentionality. He is selective because he values peace. He doesn't chase what feels chaotic. He doesn't try to change her. He simply offers presence, and that alone is rare. In Jungian terms, he is living from the self, not the persona. The persona is the mask we wear to be accepted, funny, helpful, agreeable. But the self is the deeper identity, built from confronting fear and not flinching when the mirror reflects something raw. Most men live from the mask. Few go far enough inward to discover the self. That's why most chase connection through performance. But the man who has returned to himself becomes the connection. Stoicism calls this apatheia, not indifference, but emotional sovereignty. The man who commands the room without trying is the man who does not give his peace away. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this, and you will find strength. And that strength is what women feel, not force, not bravado, strength that doesn't need to declare itself. She feels that he's not seeking a rescuer. He's not waiting for someone to validate his masculinity. He has chosen his path, He has built his rhythm, and when he speaks, it is measured, not because he is cautious, but because he no longer needs to convince. His truth doesn't need loudness. His yes means yes. His no is final. His silence not a void, but a fortress. There's a reason this man becomes unforgettable. She may not remember his words, but she'll remember the way she felt in his presence, stable, challenged, inspired, a little disarmed, not because he tried to impress her, but because he didn't. And that energy lingers longer than compliments ever could. So how does one become this man? You stop running. You stop explaining your pain to those who weaponize it. You stop rehearsing conversations in your mind, hoping to be seen. You go inward, sit in silence, and confront what you've abandoned. You pick up your disciplines again without an audience. You define your values and actually live by them. You take your attention back. You make peace your priority. And over time, you stop needing to chase. You stop needing to explain. You stop needing to be chosen, because you have already chosen yourself. And that is what she feels when you enter the room. Not your words, not your achievements, but your alignment. That's what makes her pause. That's what makes her want to come closer without you saying a single thing. When he stops explaining, she starts feeling everything. There is a strange moment in every woman's life when she realizes something unsettling. The man she once overlooked now lingers in her thoughts, not because he pursued her, but because he stopped explaining himself. He became still, rooted, and suddenly, she couldn't ignore the way he made her feel without ever asking for it. That moment is not magic. It's psychological. It's energetic. When a man stops living to be understood and starts living in understanding of himself, the dynamic of attraction shifts. She no longer hears his pitch. She feels his essence. And what she feels is what she trusts. This is the paradox few men understand. The more you explain your intentions, your worth, your emotions, the less she feels them. Words without energy fall flat. But when you embody what you used to explain, she doesn't need the speech, she feels the signal. You are no longer trying to earn her belief. You are simply walking in truth. Carl Jung described this as the transition from persona to authentic self. The persona is desperate to be accepted, to be praised, to be validated. It justifies everything. It wants to be the good guy, the perfect partner, the nice man. But when a man stops identifying with that mask and instead begins confronting the raw truths within him, his shadow, his pain, his unhealed wounds, he changes. He doesn't speak less because he's cold. He speaks less because he has nothing to prove. And that silence speaks louder than any explanation ever could. In relationships, this creates a seismic shift. A woman may not be able to articulate what's different, but she'll feel it in her gut. She'll lean in, not because he chased, but because his stillness offered safety. His restraint offered polarity. His unapologetic presence reminded her of something rare. A man who is complete enough to walk away from anything that demands he betray himself. The Stoics knew this. Epictetus said, "Don't explain your philosophy, embody it." A man who lives by principle does not need to argue. A man who knows his value does not ask others to validate it. When he speaks, it is measured. When he's silent, it's intentional. And in a world saturated with noise, that silence becomes irresistible. You've seen it happen. She becomes curious. She begins to feel the absence of your explanations, and that absence forces her to feel, to reflect, to wonder, what changed? Why does he seem more powerful now that he says less? The answer is simple. You stopped speaking to be heard and started being someone who cannot be ignored. This doesn't mean you play games. This isn't about withholding to manipulate. This is about alignment. When your actions, values, and energy are in sync, you don't need to justify them, you just live them. And those who are meant to walk with you will feel it. Those who aren't will fall away. And that's the beauty. When a man stops explaining, he stops attracting confusion. He no longer sends mixed signals because he no longer entertains mixed intentions. His energy becomes clear, even in silence. And the women who feel it, the right ones, begin to respond with the one thing he no longer has to ask for: respect. So stop explaining your standards. Stop apologizing for your path. Stop softening your truth to be accepted. Be the man who no longer narrates his worth. Be the man who lives it and lets the world feel the difference. The moment you stop needing acceptance is the moment you command respect. There's a shift that happens when a man finally gets tired, not the exhaustion of the body, but the quiet fatigue of always bending to be liked. At first, it feels like collapse, like disconnection, like something is dying, but in truth, it's something sacred being born. Self-containment, the deep, grounded state of no longer needing to be chosen in order to feel worthy. This is the turning point that separates the boy from the man. The boy lives to be accepted. He shapeshifts to avoid conflict, smiles to keep peace, edits himself to be more palatable, and for a while, it works. People like him, women feel safe around him, but slowly, invisibly, it corrodes his center, because no matter how many people admire him, he knows deep down they're not seeing him. They're seeing a curated version, a filtered soul. Carl Jung would call this living through the persona, the mask we create to survive. But the longer you wear it, the more you lose touch with what lies beneath: the self, the truth, the shadow, the raw edges that make you whole. A man who lives too long in the persona becomes resentful because he's loved for a version that's not real. He smiles, but inside he's starving, not for affection, but for integrity. And when he finally lets the mask crack, everything changes. He says, no, not with drama, but with clarity. He holds boundaries not to punish, but to preserve. He stops seeking approval not out of arrogance, but out of truth. He's not mean, he's not distant, he's just done performing. This is the man people start to respect, not because he demands it, but because he doesn't. He no longer lowers his standards to be accepted. Instead, he raises the threshold of what's allowed into his space. He no longer trades peace for proximity. He doesn't prove, doesn't chase, doesn't cling. His attention becomes selective. His presence becomes valuable. And that rarity commands attention not for what he says, but for what he refuses to dilute. Women especially feel this. She can tell when a man no longer needs her to like him. He listens, but he doesn't bend. He cares, but he doesn't compromise his mission. He offers space, not submission. And that space, the steadiness of his no, the calm of his boundaries, the dignity in his silence does something to her. It makes her respect him, even when she disagrees, because she sees a man who has stopped making himself smaller to fit into someone else's expectations. Marcus Aurelius said, "If you are pained by external things, it is not they that disturb you, but your own judgment of them." This is the root of Stoic power. A man who no longer lets others' opinions define his reality becomes unshakable. He doesn't react to rejection, he recenters. He doesn't flinch when misunderstood, he remembers who he is. And from that place, he speaks less. But everything he says lands. And here's the paradox. When you stop needing acceptance, people accept you more. But it's no longer the goal, it's just a byproduct. Because the men who are most respected are not the loudest, they're the most aligned. Aligned with values, not attention. Aligned with truth, not applause. Aligned with principle, not popularity. So if you're tired of being liked but not respected, here's your invitation. Stop softening your edges. Stop shrinking your voice. Stop explaining who you are. Let the old you die, the one that needed to be seen. And become the man who sees himself so clearly that the world has no choice but to respond in kind. When you finally become yourself, the world stops resisting you. There's a strange thing that happens when a man truly becomes who he is without apology, without performance, without seeking approval. The resistance he once felt from others begins to fade. The tension he used to meet in every room dissolves. Not because the world suddenly becomes easier, but because he's no longer in conflict with himself. This is one of life's paradoxes. The more you abandon your truth to fit in, the more the world rejects you. But when you return to yourself, when you stop hiding the parts you were taught to fear, life begins to bend in quiet. mysterious ways. Carl Jung called this individuation the process of becoming whole by integrating the shadow and embracing the self. It's not about becoming perfect, it's about becoming real, and that realness carries a frequency, a magnetic weight. People feel it, opportunities feel it, the universe, through what Jung called synchronicity, begins to align not with your old persona, but with the version of you that finally showed up without fear. The Stoics pointed to this too. Epictetus wrote, "First say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do." The man who decides who he truly is and lives by that standard becomes immovable. He stops being a leaf in the wind of others' opinions and becomes a rooted force. And rooted forces don't chase acceptance, they shift environments just by standing still. When you stop abandoning your core, something happens on an energetic level. You don't attract the same people anymore. You don't tolerate the same disrespect. You don't chase love, you emit it. This isn't spiritual fluff, it's psychological fact. When your values, energy, and actions are in harmony, your presence becomes stable, and people crave stability in a world of chaos. That's why they come to you. That's why they listen when you speak. That's why women respect your silence more than they respected your words before. Because now, you're not asking anyone to define you. You've done the defining yourself. This is what happens when a man no longer betrays himself to keep the peace. He becomes the peace, and the world adjusts to his rhythm. He no longer looks for signs, he becomes the signal. And yes, it will cost you. Your old identity will burn. The people who loved your performance will fall away. The parts of you that fed on approval will panic. But what emerges from the ashes will not need applause. It will be enough unto itself. That's the man who builds legacy. That's the man who draws the right relationships. That's the man who doesn't just survive. He shapes the world around him by shaping himself first. So if you feel the tension easing, if you feel things clicking, if you feel lighter, even though nothing external has changed, know this: you are no longer resisting your own design, and the world is responding. When you stop chasing, you stop being pitied and start being chosen with respect. There's a powerful clarity that dawns on a man when he stops running not away from himself, not toward someone else, but into stillness. It doesn't come with applause. It doesn't even come with immediate peace. It often arrives in the quiet space after heartbreak or exhaustion. But in that silence, something profound becomes clear. When I chased, I was tolerated. When I stopped, I was respected. Because chasing, no matter how romantic it appears, is rooted in imbalance. It says, I need you to see me so I can feel whole. And that need, desperate, high frequency, anxious, does not inspire respect. It triggers pity, or worse, indifference. Carl Jung would say this pattern comes from the unconscious. The inner boy who was once abandoned now seeks women who mirror that wound. Hoping to rewrite the story, he overgives, over-explains, overcommits, believing that proving his worth will buy him love. But women don't fall for effort, they fall for presence. And presence cannot exist where desperation lives. The moment you stop chasing is the moment you reclaim your energetic dignity. And dignity, once reclaimed, changes everything. Now, your value isn't on the table. Now, your attention isn't a reward for beauty. Now, your silence is not emptiness, it's discernment. The Stoics spoke this truth plainly. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Look within. Within is the fountain of good, and it will ever bubble up if thou wilt ever dig." The more you source your worth from within, the less you try to extract it from others. You don't chase because you don't need anyone to complete you. You're not trying to be chosen. You've already chosen yourself. And that changes the entire gravitational pull around you. Women feel it immediately, not because you're cold, but because you're whole. They notice that your compliments aren't bait, that your gaze is steady, not hungry, that your interest is measured, not clinging. You're not trying to convince them you're worthy, you're letting your life speak for itself. This doesn't mean you play games. It doesn't mean you shut down emotionally. It means your love comes with standards. It means your affection has weight. It means you no longer hand your time. energy or devotion to those who haven't earned it through reciprocity and respect. And here's the paradox. The less you chase, the more you're chosen, but this time by the right people. Not out of guilt, not out of pity, but out of resonance. Because now you're not asking to be saved. You're inviting someone to walk with you side by side. That kind of love isn't born from pursuit. It's born from presence. It's born from the man who stays still long enough to hear his own soul again, who no longer trades identity for intimacy, who refuses to let emotional hunger become his compass. When you live from this place, everything changes. You stop being pitied. You stop being almost enough. You stop being plan B. You become the storm and the shelter. You become the man she doesn't want to fix but to follow, because your stillness doesn't ask for attention. It commands consideration. So if you've ever felt unseen while giving everything, here's the truth. You were chasing. You were trying to earn what can only be met, not begged for. Now you know better. So stop. Let the silence do what your explanations never could. You don't need to be loved when you've become the man who radiates freedom. There comes a final shift, not loud, not dramatic, but tectonic. It happens the moment you stop waiting to be loved. Not because you've given up on love, but because you've become someone who no longer needs it to feel whole. And ironically, that's when love arrives, not the kind you chase, but the kind that's drawn to you. Why? Because you now embody the rarest signal of all, inner freedom. Carl Jung called this the integration of the self, the moment when a man no longer searches for identity in others. He is no longer defined by her response, her attention, her desire. He has faced the dark corners of his psyche, shaken hands with his shadow, and emerged not bitter, not cold, but free. A man who doesn't love to be completed, a man who loves because it overflows. And this is what women truly feel, whether they can articulate it or not. The difference between a man who needs love to function and a man who offers love because he functions well on his own. The first is heavy, the second is magnetic. And it all begins when you stop needing to be loved and start becoming the kind of man love can't ignore. The Stoics would say, this is the essence of freedom, self-governance. You are no longer a slave to desire, no longer a puppet pulled by fear or insecurity. You choose, you respond, you walk into rooms with quiet clarity. You no longer rehearse what to say to be liked. You just speak. And if someone resonates, they stay. If they don't, you release them without malice. That's emotional sovereignty. That's what true love respects. Because when you stop seeking approval, you create space for respect. When you stop performing for affection, you start living in alignment. And when you stop asking to be seen, people start noticing what can't be ignored. A man who has found home within himself. You become the kind of man who doesn't chase intensity, but cultivates consistency. The kind who doesn't make others feel needed, but safe. The kind of man who doesn't beg to be chosen, but chooses himself so completely that anyone who joins his life must rise to meet that standard. You don't just become attractive, you become anchored. And here's the most powerful part. People can feel this even in your silence. You don't have to explain who you are anymore. You are who you are. That stillness, that non-reactivity, that unshakable calm, it's not a performance. It's the afterglow of a man who did the work no one saw, who faced the nights no one comforted, who built the discipline no one clapped for. Now, you don't need to be loved to feel alive, but you are, deeply, naturally, powerfully, because nothing is more lovable than a man who is at peace with himself. So this is the final truth. You don't earn love through sacrifice. You attract it through liberation. And when love comes now, it doesn't come to rescue you. It comes to witness you. Not the version you curated, not the role you once played, but the man you finally became.